Hi, my name is Rupi Chima, and I'm the managing partner of EB-5 Energy. What makes EB-5 Energy a unique opportunity for EB-5 investors is it's naturally a rural project, meaning oil and gas production is going to happen in a rural area. Unlike an EB-5 real estate project, where what we're finding is mostly projects tied to hospitality or tourism, second homes, they're dependent on discretionary income, which, in my opinion, makes them a riskier asset class. Whereas we are truly a rural project. Secondly, we are approved by USCIS. We have our 956F approval, and we also have investor approvals. So we have received 526E approvals as well. Also, we offer our investors a first priority position on the project's cash flows and assets. So this makes our project a great opportunity. Before I get more into the project, I would like to introduce our guest today, Rakesh Patel. Rakesh is the founding and managing partner of Patel Law Group, now PSBP Law. They're based in Irving, Texas. Rakesh is a graduate of the University of Oklahoma and the University of Denver's Law and MBA programs. Rakesh has been practicing for over 20 years and was first introduced to the EB-5 program in 2015. Over the past 9 years, he has successfully represented hundreds of investors. Rakesh is an expert in preparing EB-5 petitions and dealing with complex source of funds issues. He also has numerous articles and videos available on his website, psbplaw.com.
Thank you very much, Ruby, for that kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen here in a second. We're going to go over some current EB-5 updates and issues that are going on that we see very common for investors. Okay. We've got the EB-5 source of funds attorney in our office. Her name is Jacqueline Trevino, and we've got a team behind us, both on the source of funds side and on the background side with the forms and preparation. And just a real quick, and I put this in all my presentations, everything I say here is just for presentation and information purposes only. Nothing in this presentation is financial advice or promotion of any project. While I'm on here with Rupi, I will be talking a little bit about projects. I will be talking about her project, but it's not a promotion of it. It's just an example of something that's going on that you'll understand in EB-5. Look, like I said, this is about us. I've been named the EB-5 top 25 attorney for the last 3 years, 20 years of immigration and real estate experience. So these are the subjects that we're going to go over today. We're going to go over some retrogression strategies, source of funds overview, children aging out, which does affect some people, a rural versus high employment area decisions, developer loan issues that we're seeing a lot in the marketplace right now, and then self-directed IRAs, which is a common source of funds that a lot of our clients are using. So let me give you some retrogression strategies. So right now, I think a lot of folks are hearing about retrogression and the problems that are going on with retrogression, that it could happen, it may happen. But what we do know today is that December priority dates for everybody that understands retrogression is just visa availability or green card availability. Priority dates are current through December. We find out every month about the middle of the previous month. So we'll know about January and December. We'll know about February and January, so on and so forth. A lot of different regional centers, a lot of different developers will tell you there's going to be retrogression. It's going to be 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 7 years. And the reality is nobody really knows. Anything that anybody tells you is a guess, and a somewhat educated guess, because we don't give them that data. Now, we'll talk about the difference between high unemployment and rural, and why rural it has a little bit of a higher advantage, because they do have a 20% of the allocation goes to rural in addition to priority processing. So it has a higher allocation of visas, which, if there's retrogression, my assumption would be that rural retrogression would be a lot less than high employment. So retrogression after filing. One of the things that people have a hard time understanding is that you could file your application before December, have a concurrent filing, EB-5, which is your 526E, your advanced parole, your EAD, and your green card application. Within about 4 to 6 months, you're going to get an advanced parole or EAD. Now, let's say your file gets approved in 8 months. We're seeing 6 to 12 months on average. We've even seen some files in rural areas process much faster than that. But let's say it gets approved in 8 months. If in 8 months, when you have your approval, there's retrogression, that means that you won't have a green card available to you unless your priority date is current. So retrogression can happen before you file, or it can happen after you file. And it can have an effect on you when you file or after you file. So it's really important to understand that retrogression is an issue all the way up until your EB-5 gets approved. One of the strategies that we're using right now of a lot of clients is doing partial investment strategy to preserve your priority date and to get away from any idea of retrogression. The point of doing that is that, number one, it's up to the regional center if they're accepting partial investments. So you have to clear that with a regional center. For example, here, you would talk to Rupi and her team about whether or not they're doing partial investments. If the answer is yes, the rules that we basically say are, we have to source all of your funds before we apply. Once we've sourced your funds and we know where your money's coming from, we let immigration know. And let's say you want to invest $400,000 now, you can do a $400,000 investment, make the partial investment, invest the rest of it within 4 to 6 months, but we can go ahead and file your application. That does a couple of things. One, preserve your priority date, so we're not worried about retrogression. And number two, you'll get your EAD in advance pro, and it gives you about 4 to 6 more months to actually to do the rest of the investment. Now, we don't recommend more than 4 to 6 months. You also have to talk to the regional center because they may say less time and there may be different rules behind it, but we do have to source all the money before the application is filed. So it's a real strategy that a lot of our clients are using to beat dates because they want to make sure there's no retrogression. It helps if you have a child that may be aging out, we'll talk about. So there's a lot of reasons why you would do it. Program set aside. What's a program set aside? What you need to know is there's high unemployment, there's rural. High unemployment has a 10% of the visa allocation. Rural has 20%. Today, you're going to be hearing about a rural project, which is to your advantage. Number one, because it's already approved. Number two, there's priority processing extremely quickly on rural applications. And it's an $800,000 investment, which everybody probably already knows. Source of funds. So this is a big part of EB-5. This is where we spend almost all of our time once we're hired. This is where immigration spends all of their time on your file. And if there's going to be an issue with your file, it's going to be on this portion and it's not going to be anywhere else. Remember, when we send your application in, they are not adjudicating Rupi's project. The project has already been approved, so we don't have to worry about that. So at our time of filing, really what we're focused on is source of funds. Number one rule is all your money has to be at risk, which the example that I always use to clients is, if I invest $800,000 tomorrow in the stock market, NVIDIA, for example, and they go bankrupt, my money was at risk. The risk is not always the same across the board. The number one rule of EB-5 is your money has to be at risk. What the backing of that is it's a conversation you have with the regionals. We trace all of our funds to their origin. It's essentially forensic accounting. So we're basically taking money from the day it was printed and it was $0 in your bank account until it gets to $800,000, whether it's income, whether it's inheritance, loans, gifts, asset sale proceeds, and we'll talk about self-directed IRAs here in a minute. We're looking at all of those documents. That's why this is a very intense process. Your tax returns are not enough. That just shows how much money you made. That doesn't show money where it came from. So it's truly looking at where all of the money came from. We use bank statements, we use sales documents, we use loan documents, all of those as a common source. I just talked about your partial versus full investment. You are allowed to do partial investments in EB-5. One of the keys there is, and we've got several approvals with partial investment after the second part of the investment is made. We do an interfiling, typically still get an RFE. We file it again with the RFE, and we've had approvals within a week after getting that RFE. So we have not seen huge delays with partial investment. And so really, when you're looking and you're deciding to do EB-5, there's two big decisions you have to make. Number one, where are you going to invest the money? Number two, where's your money coming from? We can guide you on the EB-5 portion of where you're going to invest your money. We can't give you financial advice. This portion of source of funds is where our team, Jacqueline, myself, are going to be spending all of our time. So one of the big things that has happened in August 15th, to be specific, is changes in the CSPA laws. So children's age is not guaranteed to be protected. Their age is going to freeze at the time of filing. So I'm going to give you a case example. If you have a child that's 20 years old and just turned 20 today, and if I file their application today, whether you're in India or in the US, their age is going to freeze. However, when your application is approved. Let's imagine that's 8 months from today or 12 months from today. Your child's age will start again from today's age. If the priority date is not current, this becomes a concern because we don't know how long retrogression is going to be. So if you have a child that's 15, 16, 17 years old, I don't worry about as much. If you have a child that's 18, 19, 20, we've got to pay attention because the longer it's pending, we have to use the calculation called the CSBA calculation when the priority date becomes current. So there's no way to tell in the future right now whether or not if you have a 20-year-old is going to 100% be included in the application. So the priority date at the time of approval is very critical. And like I said, there's no way to predict a date of approval or priority date at the time of approval. So processing times, I think this is a big deal for you to understand because I've seen a lot of questions about processing times and sustainment period. A lot of them recently were. So processing time before the new laws were 4 to 7 years for an EB-5 application. Current processing times for these set-asides, which is high unemployment or rural, are 6 to 24 months. Rural is really 6 to 12 months. And we even have an example of a case that got approved in 2.5 months here recently. That's not every case. We don't know why that happens. Sometimes it's just the luck of the draw, but we've had cases approved that fast, which means the client was getting their green card in maybe 8, 9 months after they've applied. It's not guaranteed to stay this fast. We don't know when it's going to change, but we do know that immigration is making an effort to process applications fast. And then as long as we can do concurrent filing, we have quicker access to your EAD and travel documents, which allows you to work and stay in the US while the application is pending. Quick side note on that. It's very important that we tell all of our clients that if you're in the US, try not to use your EAD until your EB-5 is approved, just in case something were to happen to your EB-5. But in the event that you want to, you have the ability to use your EAD. And there's a lot of rules behind when you can travel, when you can't travel, and we can take that on a case-by-case basis. So one of the big issues right now that you're seeing in the marketplace, and if you go and Google EB-5 and developer loans, this has become very common in recent years. There's several regional centers and or developers that give a loan at a certain interest rate for you to invest in their project. There's no explicit laws, any regulations from USCIS not allowing it as long as the loans are in good faith. However, recently, we've seen a lot of RFEs and denials in the marketplace with these structures of loan, which has put them in jeopardy. So if you're a client of mine and you ask me, can I get a loan from the regional center? Typically, it's not the regional center. It's a related entity where it may have common ownership, things like that. I would tell you to proceed with caution because right now, immigration is really challenging that. We do believe there's going to be lawsuits. We do believe there's going to be appeals, but that takes time to get through. And so you would be taking a risk in the event you did that. Now, we're not saying you can't do it. We're just saying that could be a risk. And remember, that risk is really to you. The risk really isn't to the developer or the regional center because you're the one that's taking that loan and then using those funds in an EB-5 project. And so it's very important to understand that if you see this, that you do your homework, you understand what your risks are. And our preference is always not using a regional center or developer loan because we don't know what the long-term outcome of that is going to be. And so that's, if you were to come to our office and ask us, that's probably the advice you're going to get. Last thing I'll talk about is the self-directed IRAs. Before I get to that, a common source for EB-5 funds are 401k loans, RSUs, employment plans, employment stock options, and then also loans against your stock portfolio. Those are common. Home equity loans are very common. So there's always going to be different opportunities to use what you have to invest in EB-5. Another one is your 401k moved over to a self-directed IRA. You have to speak to your plan administrator, and the deal has to be uploaded in a portal from the intermediary that's going to do your self-directed IRA. So this project must be registered. It doesn't take long, whether it's this project, different project. There's different platforms out there. So every project's not going to be registered everywhere. Doesn't mean it can't be. It's really quick. And you can only use the investor's funds, not the spouse's funds. One of the common mistakes we've seen by some attorneys is they've used self-directed IRAs, but they've used both husband and wife self-directed IRAs. The problem with that is it can only be one investor. So that self-directed IRA, they're investing on your behalf. For example, you're going to be signing a set of subscription documents. There's going to be a separate set of documents the custodian is signing on your behalf with your funds. It gets a little confusing, but you can't then use your spouse's funds in a self-directed IRA. So whoever's money you're using, that's who you have to use. Another quick note, I know that I'll talk about our process here in a second, but another quick note is that as of Friday, the USCIS processing fees went back down to $3,675. It's almost an $8,000 reduction in fees. We don't think this is going to stay in place forever. USCIS has to actually put out a rule with giving everybody the proper time to comment. So we feel like sometime in January or February, the fees may go up. It probably won't go up to what they were, but they will go up. So these next 30 to 60 days are an extremely good time to save yourself $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 just in filing fees. Last part of this is our process is real simple. If you're interested in talking to us, having a consultation, it's free. You'll email us, we'll send you a questionnaire, you'll fill it out, and then we'll sit down and have a free consultation. It takes usually 45 to 60 days. Sometimes it takes longer depending on your source of funds to get your file together. And then we'll send you a source of funds spreadsheet as a guide for you and us to go through to make sure that you're on track to where you need to be as an investor. There's a lot more to it. It's a complicated process. It's not easy. I tell clients all the time, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so we're here. The minute you hire us up until you get your permanent green card, we're going to be your attorneys and we'll help you get through the process.
Great. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about our project. Our project is located in western Oklahoma. And on the map, you see this red area that is called the Anadarko Super Basin. This is a very prolific area for oil and gas production. According to the Department of Energy, the Anadarko Super Basin has 1.8 billion barrels of oil in reserve. So this is the area we're drilling in Oklahoma, in rural counties. And we control 1,280 acres of producing leases, which allows us to drill our first 8 wells. What we are focused on is recompleting wells, meaning that wells that were originally drilled vertically, now we go in and go horizontally for a mile and fracture the rock, and which gives us 3 to 5 times more production that was originally gotten from these wells. Our team is Aspire Asset Management, that's our operator. And so the project is being operated by a very experienced team that has drilled tens of thousands of wells across Oklahoma and Texas. And they've also worked internationally. We're in very good hands when it comes to the technical work. And we have a great location. We are located very close to Cushing, Oklahoma, which is a major storage and pipeline hub, which makes moving our product very seamless and efficient. A little bit about individual wells and how they work. One well takes us about 6 to 8 weeks to drill a well. And then we have production, and then we have sales. By the 3rd month, we are basically selling the product that we produced. A well will cost us around $4 to $4.5 million to drill. And over its lifetime, it's going to give us about 250,000 barrels of oil. Now, if you look at this chart, the blue chart, it tells you the production curve of an oil well. An oil well will produce for about 20 years, but 50% of its production is going to come in the first 3 years. So we're going to get back $15 million in revenue. But over $7 million of that is going to get returned to us by year 3, which is what gives us the ability to repay investors after 3 years. So we are repaying investors from cash flow and from selling the product that we produce, not from any future refinancing scenarios. So what does that mean? What does that mean to investors, and what do investors get? Our investors initially, while their money is at risk and while the investors haven't gotten paid back, they participate in a preferred yield, which can range anywhere from 0.75% to 2.5%. Now, the reason that is not a set amount is because it's based on availability of cash. We have a preferred dividend pool of 9% that goes from the project company to the EB-5 fund. So that 9% covers the EB-5 fund's expenses, such as fund admin, regional center fees, brokers' fees, other operating cost of the fund, not the drilling program, but of the fund. And then whatever is remaining is shared with investors. So this is why I'm giving you a range. Depending on the cost of that year, you will have some sort of a preferred yield while your money is invested with us. And outside of that 9%, the cash flow that we generate from our wells is not allowed to be removed out of the company. When we start getting cash flow in the fourth month after we drill a well, we cannot simply just start distributing it as profits. We have to maintain it in the company until the investors are ready to get repaid. That cash is used to repay the investors after 3 years. Once you get repaid, you still stay in the company as limited partners. We do not liquidate you. You are shareholders of the company for the lifetime of the company. After all the investors have gotten repaid their initial $800,000, that is when we can start distributing profits. The EB-5 investors collectively get 35% of the profits of the company until the wells are producing. And we're estimating that can be up to as much as the money you've invested, $800,000 in profits. We have a lot of transparency and oversight. Our escrow agent is Customer's Bank. Your funds will go into an escrow account with Customer's Bank, and they will get released once your application has been received by USCIS. Once the money is moved out of escrow into the EB-5 fund, we have a third-party fund administrator that is a co-signer on our account. So when it's time to move the funds from the EB-5 fund or the new commercial enterprise into the project, Trident Trust must sign off on that. 30 days after that, we provide a report to Trident Trust showing how the funds were used. We are sponsored by Mid-America Rural Development Regional Center, which ensured all the immigration and job tracking compliance to USCIS. Real estate projects, the EB-5 fund is not operating a business. It's in the business of lending money, typically to a third-party developer. EB-5 investors invest as equity owners into the new commercial enterprise, but that money is loaned to a third-party developer. And in that scenario, the repayment depends on a future scenario of refinancing or a sale of the project, because it typically takes 3-4 years of construction timeline. There's no money coming in during that time. And then you have 2 to 3 years of stabilization of the asset. And that is how the exit strategy is designed, is on a refinancing to happen in the future. So obviously there's refinancing risk. Markets can shift over 5-6 years, which introduces its own element of risk. And if things go wrong, EB-5 loans are typically mezzanine loans, meaning they're unsecured loans, and there's usually a bank that has the first lien on the asset. So if things were to go wrong and there's not enough money to pay the debt, in most scenarios, there isn't much recourse available because, first of all, the bank may take all the assets, and also it costs money and a lot of time to actually pursue something in court, which may not even be worth it. So a lot of times investors end up walking away. You will hear a regional center saying, hey, we have paid our investors. All our investors have gotten paid. But a good question to ask is, did they get fully repaid? There's a lot of times settlements end up happening where EB-5 investors are paid maybe cents on their investment. Those are good questions to ask. When you repay investor, did you pay the entire investment amount? Ours is a strictly an equity model. We've designed this offering for the benefit of investors. So it's a direct ownership model, meaning the investors invest into the EB-5 fund, which owns and controls the project company, which owns and controls all of the assets and the production. As I explained earlier, the repayment comes from our revenue that we generate. We are not going to a bank in the future to borrow money and repay the investors. It's a very simple concept, actually. This offering has been designed putting investors first and giving them a fair deal. One of the things I actually constantly get asked is, this is too good to be true. How come you guys are being so generous? So people feel like it's just too good to be true. And I say that it's an offering that basically is giving a fair deal to investors and it's putting investors first.